Welcome to Christ for Life. We are excited to have our third installment with Dr. Clark Vangilder. We're talking about reaching millennials. And today we've got an amazing topic. It's about mentoring and this idea of reverse mentoring. And I'm going to tee off the conversation and then Dr. Vangilder is going to run with it. The idea is years ago when most of us who are over the age of 50 were in a new business or we were starting a new role in some kind, we were told, wait your turn, learn the ropes, and eventually it'll be your turn to be the leader or the guide or whatever it was. The challenge today is because there's so much information that's available, it is hard to tell a millennial, wait your turn if your turn is 20 years down the road. Now, of course, everyone needs wisdom to apply information because, in fact, that's what wisdom is all about. It's the right application of knowledge. But the reality is reverse mentoring means that there's more of a give and take today between the older generations and millennials. And so with that idea in mind of reverse mentoring, reaching millennials and getting them with their hands on the driving gears or the steering wheel quicker than it was in previous generations, what does that look like? That sounds daunting. Dr. Vangilder?
Yeah, I would, that's quite a chore. One of the things about the mindset of millennials is, and in the Barna data that we're considering, the idea of take me seriously and take me seriously now. Now, whether that's actually what they were saying verbatim or that was the way that Barna profiled all sorts of ways to say the same thing, it doesn't really matter much. That does bear out in reality. And whether anybody deserves to be taken seriously now within the scope of some problem or activity is another question. So, right or wrong, it's the mindset, and we can ignore it, we can fight it, or we can leverage it. And the latter, I think, quite literally on some levels, will save the church as an organization that older generations will be able to see as their legacy, whereas the former approaches of just ignoring it or fighting it pretty much guarantees no legacy, because the church is an aging church. But the church, God's gonna the church will survive because he builds his church, but it might take on an entirely different face and kind of leave you behind if you don't do some work now. And I think that we might just, you just can't patiently wait for the Lord. That sounds bad to say those words, as if you're just going to sit around and do nothing or keep doing the things that haven't done anything. So, you want to be very careful with that. So, somebody has said, that waiting on the Lord isn't a call to do no thing, but rather a call to do the right thing. And that's philosophically, that's the big picture. That's the right thinking. Right thinking always leads to right doing. But you got to have the right thinking philosophically. That's right. But then you want to take that thing. How am I going to put that into action? So, on a personal level, waiting on the Lord wouldn't be just careless inaction, but it might be careful interactions. Mm-hmm. And I keep going back to the Mayberry model, Andy Griffith. And then practically, you just don't want to have some careless lack of action, but you want to have careful plans of action. And so God doesn't just expect us to do nothing. I mean, that's pretty rare in Scripture. But I really, it sounds silly that I would look at Andy Griffith as a model. But if you think about it, he would let people just blow it. But what did you find in all of those shows? They would come out shining. They would find a talent or they would develop a talent. And he just he wasn't afraid to do what you were saying. He wasn't going to say, no, you wait your turn. It'll be your time 10 years from now. No, he just let the kid roll with it. Mm-hmm. He actually took them seriously, but he took them seriously within a set of constraints. And so I think, it sounds funny, but I think you don't need to go to a conference and figure out this bit of leadership. Just watch a few episodes of the Andy Griffith Show and copy him, the way he dealt with Opie and Barney. And, of course, it was a comedy and all that, but he was very careful to not constantly correct. No, that's wrong. Get in line. He said, all right, well, let's see what happens. And so I sort of think that getting at it that way, just, what's going to happen, I think is a good way to start taking them seriously, which is one of their heart cries, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So this idea, as you're speaking, comes to mind that there's basically it's a theme park that is in the state that we go to for summer vacation. And they have these cars they're antique cars, and you can, pay the fee and you can ride on them, but there's a center rail that goes through the circuit around the theme park, and the cars have these bumpers so that you can let your kids drive and they get the idea of driving and they can step on the gas and put on the brake. But the universe of mess ups is tightly constrained. They're not going to hit anybody because there are no people allowed in that area, and they can't wander more than 2 or 3 feet in either direction of the center rail. And if they do, the bumpers get them back on course. So they're constrained, but yet they're driving. They're pressing the pedals, they're using the steering wheel. And it sounds like reverse mentoring, that would be like a picture of that, where if you can limit the universe of really bad mess up options, right? Like the church doesn't just evaporate because of a bad decision, a 19-year-old makes, right? That you limit the adverse reactions or implications or opportunities for a catastrophic event, but yet you still let the next generation put their hand on the wheel, touch the brakes, the gas pedal, put on the gas a little bit more, ease up, rather than saying, hop in the car with me and I'm going to drive you around for the next 20 years. But rather, hey, we've limited the negative repercussions of what we're going to do here, but we're going to give you the opportunity to run with this event or whatever. That's kind of reverse mentoring in a nutshell, it seems like.
I think so, and I think if the constraints are the mission, and there's provision, there's the resources that are necessary to do whatever, and that's something that's easy for us to do. So, pastors and church leaders already have a mission, or at least you would hope the mission's clear. If it's not clear, you need to make it clear. And then the provision. So there's one thing that I think that slips off a lot of people's radar is the current generation that is funding everything is the wealthiest generation we've seen in, forever. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to happen anytime soon again. Mm-hmm. We will be long dead and gone, and my kids will probably be long dead and gone by the time there's another generation like that. I mean, the wealth of the boomer generation is just astonishing. And so how are they going to do church in the future? Because that money's not going to be there. I mean, it's just practically speaking, it's not going to be there. So part of the legacy building that I think that the older generations, because as you get older, you're able to do less and less physically, and you contribute in other ways. And so maybe one of the huge setups that the current generation that's in leadership, if you will, funding the church is, how am I going to set up the church for the future financially? And that's not easy. I have no idea how to do that, but, debt-free, but also gearing up for the future. But I really think that we need to think, how do I pass this torch? And when I pass the torch, maybe it's going to be a virtual torch. It's going to be on a cell phone. It's not going to be the same kind of torch that I thought it would be. I mean, it is what it is now, and it's going to be something different. And you may not even be able to think of what that new thing looks like, but maybe they can. Mm-hmm. So if we can take the mission to them, take them seriously now by taking the mission to them now. Yeah. And just kind of see what happens as we try to say, this is the mission. Here's the box.
Right.
Here's the rail. You need to follow this. How are we going to pull it off? And just see what you get.
I think that's great. And there's probably that thought as we start to wrap up this segment is, I think, to the analogy of teaching children to drive on the road. Now we're using real cars. And it's a lot of the things you just mentioned are actually seen in the passing of the baton of driving from parent to child, because I just think about our oldest daughter. For years and years, when she was able to get out of a car seat and choose to sit in the front or the back because she was old enough, she would always sit in the back, and she would say, I don't want to sit up front because if there's an accident, you know, the people in the front usually don't fare statistically as well as people in the back. And then about her sophomore year, I look over one day, bringing her to school, I was like, hey, you're up front. She says, I want to watch how you drive. And so for the next year or so, she would watch how I would use the gas and the brake and the steering and shifting the gear. She would watch that almost literally 6 months to a year. And then she got her permit, and then she learned to drive. And now she drives, and she'll go to, well, before we had the social distancing, she would drive herself to campus, you know, at the community college. She's in high school, but taking classes, she would drive herself. I wasn't in the car. And so she went from, I'm not getting in the front seat, to I'm going to get in the front seat and watch, then a permit, then a driver's license, and then driving on her own. And I think about my two older kids. They now have purchased their own vehicles. They have their own insurance. They're on their own. But there was a time when they were buckled in a baby seat. But now they have their own vehicle. It has nothing to do with me. They chose their vehicle, the whole thing, because now they're out of the house. If we look at our church like that, to say, look, pay attention to the next generation that gets into the front seat. Watch for those people, the millennials, the Gen Zers, the ones that get into the front seat and they say, I'm observing. Those are your mentees. They're the ones who are ready. Pour yourself into them, because they're the ones who will eventually be driving, that is leading the church very, very soon, with very little need for you. Now, of course, our kids still call us, hey, what type of car should I buy? You know, but they're on their own. And it seems like the churches that tell the kids you have to stay in the back seat until you're 30, you're going to age out before they drive.
They're going to look for a different ride.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And,
that's right. Because being driven to work by their 90-year-old parent because they couldn't get their driver's license isn't going to work very long.
They ain't going to play that. And I think we underestimate, well, I know we totally underestimate the minds of the younger generations. And that's probably always been true. But millennials and Gen Zs, they're not stupid. Obviously, they don't know as much as the generations that are older, but that's always been true. That's a no-brainer. It's like gravity. And they're motivated. They want to do the right things. They want to know the truth. They want to make a difference in the world. They think they can do it now. They think they can do it this week. Okay. And maybe they can. I think part of it is, what's the best way to pull this off? Well, there's probably no best way. There's probably a bunch of great ways. And we're better off just stepping up to bat and taking a swing and letting them take a swing than not taking a swing at all. Yeah. It's just really, it's time to get out there, look for, the people that do want to watch and figure it out. Yeah, those are going to be your first batch of mentees. And just like with younger kids, they see those older kids, they want to be like them. So that's a natural progression. And I think we both aren't saying that millennials are like children. It's just the analogy. It's a metaphor.
Right.
But that's human nature. And boy, we got to get on it now, because like we said before, 2 out of 3 millennials are walking away from church. And that you can't sustain that for very long.
Amen.
It'd be troublesome.
To wrap it up into a nutshell, what I think I hear you say is, look, to the church, millennials, they can't do everything in the church, but they can do something let them take a crack at it. Let them try. Give them an opportunity to do the things that they can do now at this stage of their spiritual development, etc. Just saying you'll have to wait your turn is going to wear out the baby boomers who are aging out, and it's going to frustrate the next generation, the next two generations, really, the Zs and the Millennials.
Exactly.
They can't do everything, but they can do something.
And I think we probably have a whole nother segment on, well, what's it going to take? And, you know, using the online tools and whatnot, how are you going to move church online?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you can't put everything online, but you could do something online. That's the way this generation's wired. It's like an innate skill for them. And again, you got to try. You got to try, and you can't just keep doing the same old thing with the same old people and not bringing in fresh blood. And there is no telling where this generation will take church life. And as long as they have the right mission, mm-hmm. the outcome's going to be what it's supposed to be.
Amen. Awesome. Great final word. Dr. Vangilder, thank you so much. God bless you, and we'll continue the dialogue.
All right, cool.
Thank you.